Hello, welcome to Building Department 101. I'm your host, Bill Forty, and I'm your Inspector of Buildings for the City of Waltham. Today's topic, we're going to be discussing building safety tips through the winter. This is a show that we did last year, and we hope that it was informative, made a couple of changes to it, but for the most part, these are all common sense practices in which you as a homeowner or a building owner should be aware of some of these things, especially if you're new at it. If you're a first-time home buyer, this is your first year or two in the house, you want to make sure that you understand what needs to be done for proper maintenance and for safety and care of a home. So we hope that you are well informed. We will make our attempts to try and bring to light any myths or anything that you can always call the building department if you have any questions, especially when it comes to building safety. We always want to be available for you anytime during regular business hours, 8:30 to 4:30 Monday through Friday. So you can always call, and even if we don't have the answers for you, we'll always try to get you the correct answer. So we're going to go right into it. Just a few things that we're going to be looking at today's show is basically the use of extension cords and supplemental heating appliances, inspection of smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors. This is a very important one. Snow loads on roofs, ice dams, those sorts of things. Clear path of egress travel from the dwelling. Egress is how you get out of a building and your pathway out. We're going to talk about clearing of snow from heating and exhaust vents, and fireplace safety, installation of wood and pellet stoves, what the permit requirements are for that. In addition to that, we're going to talk about the holiday tree practices, the safe practices for having a holiday tree in your house during the season for lighting and for wiring. In addition, we're going to talk about storage near furnaces and heating appliances. This is always a problem in some homes. You gather a lot of stuff and it gets cluttered, and you're running out of room, and the only place it seems to make any sense is where you're not really living near. So we're going to talk about that, and temporary power generators and temporary heating equipment. So we hope that we can help you in taking care of your building or your house, whichever you may have. So the first area is the use of extension cords. Never use them. Really, they shouldn't. Extension cords should never really be used. The health code requires that no extension cords can be used through a window or a door or anything like that. If your house, if you find yourself in need of a lot of extension cords, then it's probably time to upgrade your house and have a licensed electrician come in and give you an idea as to what your house needs to be brought up to current electrical codes. Never recommended that you do use an extension cord, but if you do use them, a couple of things to consider: how much load is on the circuit. So you want to make sure that if you do have to use an extension cord or a power strip, you want to make sure that you're not on the same circuit as your refrigerator or your bathroom or something like that. It's always a good idea to have a dedicated circuit if you need to run more than one power outlet off of the same outlet. So you just want to be careful and use common sense when you use an extension cord. You always want to use a power strip with a GFI C on the strip itself, so that if it gets too hot or something faults out, then it will shut off and not cause any fire possibilities of fire in your house. So that's always a good idea, is to use a power strip with a trip with a trip circuit on it. If your power does trip out when you're checking the service panel, it's always recommended that if you have a fuse panel, you don't go near it. These things are old, and they have a tendency to create a shock hazard. If you're familiar with it, and you know that there's one circuit that always pops, and you have to replace a fuse, which is basically a screw-in fuse, you always want to exercise caution. But at the same time, you want to make sure that you never use a fuse bigger than the size that's already in there. The reason why the fuse are sized at 15 or 20 amps is because that circuit will heat up if it's overloaded, and that's what pops the fuse. So you never want to increase the fuse size to try and get it to not trip. The reason why that's there is for safety purposes, so you always want to try to avoid that. And so in looking at that, you want to make sure that your house, your electrical system is upgraded and that you're not overburdening it. If you have, especially if you have knob and tube wiring, which is highly uncommon now, but you do see it now and again. Knob and tube wiring can be very dangerous, especially if the coatings on the wire become exposed or they become brittle and they get exposed to insulation or so forth. They can create a fire hazard. So you always want to make sure that if your wiring is old, that you don't want to overburden it, and that that you get it looked at by a licensed electrician to make the determination that it's safe to use. Okay. Smoke and carbon monoxide detectors. This is what will save your life, especially in the wintertime when you don't have windows open, the house is kind of closed up, there's no draft going through it. Very, very important to have not only working smoke and carbon monoxide detectors, but also to make sure that they're adequately placed. If you're not sure about where to place them, you can always call your local fire department. They can be more than happy to come down or maybe give you some instruction over the phone as to where they're supposed to be placed. But you always want to make sure that you have adequate smoke and carbon monoxide detectors in your house at all times. It's recommended that you change your batteries every 6 months. You want to do it when you change your clocks. That's kind of a reminder because we do have daylight savings time here in Massachusetts. It's always a good idea to change your batteries out when you change the clocks. It's a good way to remind yourself. But every 6 months is what's recommended. The batteries you buy off the shelf are not always charged up properly, and you may not be home while the low battery warning is going off, and you may come home and you're not cognizant that that the battery's no longer working. So always a good idea every 6 months. That's what's recommended. You want to always locate your smoke detectors within bedrooms and within hallways. I believe it's within 3 feet of a bedroom for a smoke detector, within 10 feet of a bedroom for a carbon monoxide detector. Again, you can call your local fire department and they will be more than happy to help you place those in the proper locations and make sure that you have an adequate number to be able to keep your home and your family safe. You want to have them at the stairs at each level, so at every level of living space and every space in your home, you want to make sure you have a smoke and carbon monoxide detector within 3 feet of the stairway, at the bottom of the stairway head. Again, you can call for specifics on that, and we'll be more than happy to guide you. Either the building department or the fire department will have that information. So you never want to unplug or remove or alter your smoke detector devices. This happens a lot in apartment buildings where you may have 3 or 4 different apartments, and people that cook, oftentimes they burn food and they like to unplug them. Sometimes they're put in kitchens where they really don't belong. They should be in common hallways and near bedrooms rather than in a kitchen. It's not recommended that you have a smoke detector in a kitchen for this particular reason, that smoke detectors do go off around cooking. So you just want to make sure that you never unplug your device. If you have one that's going off too much, you may want to talk to a professional about having it moved. Battery-operated smoke detectors do not necessarily have to be installed by a professional. You can install them as a homeowner, but again, it's always a good idea to get advice from either the fire or building department as to what the locations of those should be. So, snow loads on roofs. This is a big one if we have more than a couple of snowstorms in succession. I know in 2015, when I first came to the city of Waltham as the inspector of buildings, we had great snow load problems in all these roofs. We had a couple of minor roof collapses, a couple of major problems. This is always an issue when there's more than, and it doesn't really matter that we have a 2-foot snowstorm. It's when we have a 2-foot snowstorm and then another 1-foot snowstorm, and then in succession we have storms in a short amount of time where the snow doesn't have time to adequately melt off the roof. So just a couple things to know about snow loads on roofs. I know that people get a little concerned when they see more than a couple of feet up there. So just so you know, the greater the slope of the roof, in other words, if you have like an old farm-style colonial with a 12-pitch roof, which basically a 12 pitch is 1 foot in every 12, that's 1 and 1, that'd be a 45-degree slope. The greater the pitch, the less stress there is on the roof. So if you have 1.5 feet of snow on a roof that's a 12 pitch, you don't really have to worry about it. When it's a 4 pitch and that's 1 foot every 4 feet, then that might be a problem. Whereas you might have to think about having the roof shoveled off. If you are going to do this yourself, a couple of safety things you really need to be aware of, and it's never recommended that you do it yourself. Always hire a licensed professional, but if you are going to attempt it, you want to make sure that you stay clear of overhead power lines. Wires that go into residential homes are usually coated, but that coating can sometimes be deteriorated from years of weather. If you touch that with something metal, you could become electrocuted. And so those wires could be live and you don't even know it. So you always want to make sure you stay clear of any overhead power lines or service connectors near a roof line. So just let it do its thing, and be advised to always stay away from any kind of power line. If you're going to use a roof rake, do one with an extension, so you don't necessarily have to be up on a ladder. Wear a hard hat and safety goggles if you're going to attempt this, and don't do it if it's more than one. If it's more than one story, it's probably you're getting into a little bit of a danger zone there. Not recommended for homeowners. That you call a professional. At that point, there are companies that will come out and shovel off your roof. It's a little bit expensive, but always worth it. Those guys do it day in and day out. They know their safety protocol. They use the proper equipment, and they can get it done relatively safely without any damage to your property. You could always run the risk of damaging a service connector or a gas meter or something like that if you're not familiar with how to remove snow off a roof. So there's a way to do it. You also want to make sure that the company that you hire is licensed and insured to do that kind of work. You don't need a specific license, but you want to make sure that if it's a roof company, that they're insured to remove snow off of roofs, because I was a contractor for years, and to have insurance to remove snow off a roof was quite expensive. So you just want to make sure that your company's qualified and properly insured. Clearing snow away from you want to clear snow away from all sides of bulkheads, porches, and doors. You want to make sure that you have adequate passage outside the house once snow has fallen. It's a good idea to have it cleared as soon as possible. This applies to commercial and residential properties. Your path of egress travel is extremely important, especially in a time where there's inclement weather out and you have to get out of the house quickly. God forbid if there was an emergency, you want to make sure that you are prepared, and always a good idea to keep those pathways open. It provides access for first responders. So if there is a fire in your house or some other kind of emergency, the first responders can get there right away, whether it's a medical issue or a building issue. So you want to make sure that your pathways are always open. You also want to look at, when it starts really getting deep, the snow starts getting deep out there, start thinking about, especially if you have young children, they're never too young to educate, other than a toddler. Even a 3-year-old can know to get to the door if you teach them properly. And you always want to make them aware that they have to, if there's a problem, if they hear the alarm, always a good idea to get everybody familiar with the house. Always come up with a spot where you're going to meet to make sure that everybody's out safe. If you have a bigger house and different parts of the house where you may not be able to see people on all sides of the house. So always a good idea to have that emergency escape plan. And commercial properties are required to have an evacuation route and an access point and a muster point. So you want to make sure that if you're in a commercial building or a commercial building owner, you want to make sure that you provide that for the tenants and employees in your building. Clearing snow from exhaust vents. This is this is something not a lot of people think about. We want to make sure that everybody knows that clearance heights for venting have changed over the years because of snow amounts, and I believe it's 30 inches off the ground for oil, and I think it's a little bit higher for gas. I'm not really sure. You can call our department to find out what the exact height is, but most new installs now that are required to be up to the code have a certain clearance from the ground that they're supposed to be without any obstructions. So always a good idea to go out, know where your vents are for all your heating equipment, and make sure that there is no snow. If they're on the roof, it's really not an issue, but when they are near the ground, a lot of times these new power vent systems vent right outside the house, or if you have a direct vent water heater or one of those wall water heaters, they vent directly to the outside on the wall. You just want to make sure that you're looking at it and you're keeping the snow clear from those vents. Very important. Natural gas versus oil burners. Oil burners burn hotter. A lot of times the oil burners will melt the snow, but you still want to make sure that they're clear. Even though you might see an area around a power vent of an oil burner, they have a tendency to burn hotter. They still don't melt the snow adequately, so you want to make sure that you always clear that. And natural gas, usually they have PVC vents. That's the white PVC pipe. Those never get hot, so you definitely want to make sure that those are clear at all times, intake and exhaust. You want to make sure if you have an oil burner, you have it serviced annually. That's the recommendation. Oil burners have a tendency to be out of tune a little bit, and they also require maintenance and clean out, rather than natural gas furnace does not always require that same annual service. So you want to make sure if you have an oil burner, you have it serviced annually. Dryer vents are a common source of fire. If the hot air can't get out, sometimes lint will back up. Always a good idea to check your vents, your closed vent, dryer vents every 6 months to make sure that they're cleared out. Lint traps are always a good idea as well. So you want to make sure that those are always taken care of. If you have a masonry fireplace, like an old style masonry fireplace, they're not as common anymore in new homes as they used to be, but from time to time, there will be a masonry fireplace built on a new home. You always want to make sure that they are maintained annually. You want to have it cleaned by a licensed chimney company. They'll come in, they'll scrape all the creosote off the sides of the flue. They'll check the dampers. They'll make sure that everything's functioning and lubricated well, and that there's no creosote buildup. That's the number one cause of chimney fires, is the buildup of creosote. I don't know how well those creosote burning logs work. I would not rely on them. I would definitely have a company come in and inspect and clean your masonry chimney once a year. If you are going to install a wood stove or a pellet stove, don't attempt it on your own. Not a good idea. These types of stoves or burning appliances, solid fuel burning appliances, are basically, they have requirements with the factory that there's supposed to be a certain clearance from combustibles. They're supposed to have a certain floor surface that they sit on, and they're supposed to be vented in a certain way with a certain length of pipe. And the number of turns that you can have in that pipe are also regulated by the factory. Never a good idea to install one of these on your own. This is not something that you want to attempt. Hire a licensed professional, somebody who is not only licensed to do that kind of work, but is also familiar with the product and it knows how to install that particular wood burning or solid burning appliance from the factory. Those factory specifications are the code when it comes to installing anything specialty that burns solid fuel. So always a good idea to hire a professional. The clearances and the venting requirements are vital to life safety, and that really goes without saying. If you put one of these things in wrong, you could really put yourself or your family in jeopardy. So always a good idea to hire a professional. So holiday tree lighting and decorations. Be sure your tree is, and this is all common sense, be sure your tree is well hydrated. You don't want to bring a dry tree into the living room that's already flaking. Try to get a tree that's not too old. Make sure that it's hydrated. Usually the Christmas tree stands have an area that retains water. You make sure that that's full with water at all times, and don't overfill it so it doesn't spill all over your floor and cause a shock hazard. But you want to make sure your tree is hydrated. You want to consider using LED lighting for the tree. Those bulbs burn a lot cooler. They burn a lot cooler when you hang them inside or whatever. Always a good idea to use LED. They're not as hot as incandescent bulbs, and they're a lot safer. You want to make sure that you use UL listed lights only, or a certified laboratory that has tested these lights to make sure. It very rarely happens, but on occasion you may go to a bargain outlet store that has lights that haven't been certified by a laboratory. You just want to make sure that it has a UL listing or other similar certifications that they have been tested and that they are safe. So always a good idea to look at that. Here's the big one. Place the tree in an area where it won't obstruct the way out. I have several doors in my house, and we always have this habit of putting them right in the way of the door that goes out to the patio. Not a good idea. You should always have that tree off to the side so that every opening in the house is available, especially if you only have two ways out and the Christmas tree is near the front door, you don't want to block that front door. That second means of egress can be vital, especially in a fire. If there's going to be a fire in the house, it might be at the tree. You want to make sure that that you don't obstruct. So it's always a good idea to have that tree away from any means of egress in a house or in a living room. Just another common sense thing. Here's another thing during the wintertime, especially because the furnace is always working overtime. You don't want to store any combustible materials within 36 inches of a furnace. So there should be 36 inches of clear space around any piece of heating equipment, whether that be a hot water heater or direct vent or a furnace. It's recommended that you keep at least 36 inches away from any heating equipment or any appliance. In addition to that, you want to make sure that your pathway to your electrical panel, your water meter, any other place in the house that's vital to get at for an emergency is kept open at all times, and that it's accessible. There could be, at any given time, there could be a need to get in there, especially the fire department, to be able to get in there and shut down a water or shut down an electrical panel. You just want to make sure that that you always have a clear path to that. And temporary power and generators, temporary heat. A permanent home generator is your best bet. When you're looking at generator power, and they've become more popular now with the amount of storms that we've had hurricanes, we've had pretty strong nor'easter storms with power outages. Generators are becoming more popular in the Northeast over the past 3 or 4 years. Always a good idea to have a factory installed generator at your home if you're going to have one at all. It will require a permit. You're going to require probably a natural gas. If it's natural gas, you'll need a gas permit. You probably need a building permit if it's placed outside, anywhere near the side of the house or in the back. You will definitely need an electrical permit, and again, these things should be installed by professionals. If you try to use just a temporary generator, a portable generator, from Home Depot, the 5,000 watt, that's when the trouble really starts. If you don't have it far enough away from the house, carbon dioxide and exhaust could get in the house, and unknowing to you, a window could be open a crack, or it could be getting through a dryer vent that's not properly dampened. There are many, many reasons why it's not a good idea to use a portable generator, even on a temporary basis, to power your house. If you're going to need a generator, best thing to do is hire a professional, have one installed permanently, and that's your safest bet. If you are going to use a portable generator for any length of time, you want to make sure that it's at least 10 feet off the building, not near any doors or windows, and you want to make sure that it's in a well-ventilated area outside, so it's not between buildings where fumes can get trapped. So never sleep or occupy a home using a fuel-fired space heater. We can't say this enough. This is where accidental death happens a lot, is those portable propane fuel heaters and anything like that, a space heater like you'd see on a construction site. Don't ever use that. Don't even put it in your garage and think that you can leave the door open, because again, this is a very dangerous thing. They can only be used under the proper ventilation requirements, and I will just tell you that a finished single-family home or multi-family home is not the place for a fuel-fired space heater. So don't ever think of it. If you have to use a portable electric heater, again, you want to make sure that you're not overburdening a circuit in your house, and that is not a permanent solution to heat a home either. So those little portable space heaters that you might use at the office for your feet or something like that, you don't want to use those to heat your home. Never recommended. Only in construction sites are those fuel-fired space heaters allowed, and only under certain circumstances. So just, again, a recommendation. You want to make sure that your smoke and carbon monoxide detectors are updated and functional, especially when it comes to something like that, having to use something like that. So again, it's our goal to keep you safe. I hope that you've got a lot of information about this about this winter and keeping your family and your home safe. Always call the building department or the fire department. We'll be more than happy to answer any questions you might have about building safety. We're open Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30. Our number is 781-314-3275. And the fire prevention office is 781-314-3710. You can call us anytime, and we'll be more than happy to give you any guidance that you need on keeping your family and your home safe. And have a great season, and thank you.